Hello, my name is Angela Schumann and I am the Shakespeare Whisperer. In this video, I will be answering a question from one of my subscribers, which is Hamlet mad? And this is such a good question. It comes up a lot in schools and it seems quite debatable and difficult to answer at first. Hamlet certainly has some wacky behaviour, and yet there seems to be a kind of inconsistency to his madness. So the short answer to this question is no, Hamlet is not mad. And we know this because he says to his friends early on, I'm about to say some weird stuff, so just ignore it. So we can see that it's planned. We might then think, okay, yes, perhaps Hamlet thought he was in control of his performance of madness, but as the play goes on, he gets swept up in it, which is a good point. So how do we know if this madness is real or fake or put on? Well, one of the things that the play does is it gives us a point of comparison for Hamlet's madness. It gives us a character who really is driven mad, and that is, of course, Ophelia. When we look at Ophelia's madness, we can see that, she starts off the play extremely sane, but by the end of the play, we can see that she's been so traumatized that she's reached a point where she seems to be no longer in control of her faculties. She no longer seems to be able to exercise the faculty of reason. She no longer seems to be in control of her behavior. There is still some logic and some insight to be gained from her songs. She's singing about a man who sleeps with a woman with the promise of marriage and then never follows through on that promise, which seems to be very obviously about her relationship with Hamlet. However, she seems to have no awareness of her surroundings and no control over her behavior. She seems to have lost the faculty for reason. So we then look at Hamlet's behavior and we say, is this the same with him? Has he lost this ability to reason? Has he lost this autonomy and this awareness of his actions and surroundings? There are certainly times when he seems to have lost control. However, if we look more closely, this isn't quite the case. He still has this autonomy. So if we take, for example, the famous speech To Be or Not to Be, this is happening immediately before the famous scene called the nunnery scene. So in the nunnery scene, Hamlet, I think it's Act 3, Scene 1, but I might be wrong. You can check. So when Hamlet comes across Ophelia in the nunnery scene, he behaves in a very extreme and irrational way. He's clearly upset and he says, there will be no more marriages, that's it, and you can't trust any woman, all of them are unchaste, and so therefore I shall banish marriage, enough. And you can say, okay, he's kind of so overwrought by how upset he is by the situation that maybe he has just lost his mind a little bit, lost control a little bit. But the play is showing us that that's not the case. How do we know this? Because immediately before this nunnery scene, we have the to be or not to be speech. And this speech, while he's expressing how upset he is, it's about him contemplating suicide, shows a great ability to reason through the consequences of decision making, which someone like Ophelia, when she is mad, doesn't have, which a mad person doesn't have. Hamlet says, oh, this life is so hard, I'm so upset. Oh, the idea of suicide is so tempting. But then he doesn't kill himself. He thinks through it and he thinks, what would the consequences of my action be? Well, it depends on what my philosophy or my eschatology is, which means thinking about what happens after death. He says, what if death is like a sleep, what kind of dreams might I have? There's the rub. That's the reason that I won't take my own life, because there could be worse consequences. This reasoning is not the reasoning of an insane person who doesn't have control anymore. This is the reasoning of somebody who is who is thinking, you know, with this higher order thinking. And again, the play's inviting us to compare this with the behavior of Ophelia. Ophelia does go and kill herself. You know, ironically, she's pushed to it by Hamlet, whereas Hamlet has the presence of mind to stop himself, to reason through it, and he doesn't go ahead and kill himself. So if Hamlet is not mad, why does he pretend to be? What advantage is there in that? Well, there are a couple. One is that if I seem to be mad, if I seem to not be bound by the limitations of reason and caution, I can appear much more dangerous to my enemies. Sometimes we see this in political leaders. You don't want to have to make an enemy of a crazy person because they aren't bound by the same hesitations as the rest of us. So it can give you a political advantage. It's also very convenient for Hamlet in being able to wriggle out of moral responsibilities. So we see him use this as an excuse towards the end of the play. It's Act 5, Scene 2, around line 220, depending on your edition. Hamlet has wronged Laertes. He has pushed Laertes' sister Ophelia to suicide. He has outright killed Laertes' father Polonius. And then when Ophelia is being buried and Laertes jumps into the grave in his grief and says, "Bury us both, my beloved sister," Hamlet chooses that moment to jump in as well and have a kind of competition. No, you didn't love her as much as I did, which is so inappropriate. So he's wronged Laertes in a lot of ways, but then he says to Horatio, "Yeah, I'll apologize to Laertes." And the apology that he sets up is so rhetorical. He manipulates Laertes into kind of having to forgive him, and he uses as a reason for this his madness. He says, "It wasn't Hamlet that wronged you, it was Hamlet's madness that wronged you. You should be angry at Hamlet's madness. In fact, I'm angry at Hamlet's madness too. I'm a victim in this too. Oh, how awful." So he uses this idea of madness as a way to escape moral responsibility for his actions. There's one other way in which we could look at this question: is Hamlet mad? Is he mad in the sense of he kind of doesn't know where he is, or he doesn't have proper control over his behavior? No, as we've said. But is he mentally well? Does he have some delusions and some serious problems in his thinking? Yes, he does. And I've talked about this in other videos that you can look at. He seems to have a lot of the qualities of a narcissist. He seems to have a kind of God complex. He sees himself as heaven's scourge and minister, which I've talked about in other videos. He seems to see himself as sent by God to kill people and also to morally tell people off at the same time. We see great inconsistencies in his philosophy and his reasoning, which are very problematic in his relation to others. So yes, it's a complex question, and you know, it's one that the play invites us to explore in a few different ways. But bottom line is, Hamlet's got some big issues with his behavior and with the way that he sees himself, but he is not mad in the sense of someone who has lost their mind and can't be held responsible for their behavior. The play shows us what that looks like with Ophelia, and with Hamlet it is clearly different. If you like this video, don't forget to like and hit the notifications bell and subscribe. If you would like me to answer more questions, please post them in the comments below.